This is a tale about a big old maple tree that decided it had had enough. You see, in the woods behind the old Willow Way Wonkers Whack-A-Mole site, they had a lot of maples, a lot of birch, and a lot of oak, all living quite harmoniously, as well as, pines and some other evergreen type trees. And they grew all up in there. It was a diverse biome of trees, but there was one maple. His name was Maurice the Maple, and he was getting a little fed up, because he had been born amidst the birches with a lot of sunlight reaching him, and he thought that this would last forever, really. But unfortunately, another nearby maple who went by Maggie Maple, eventually started to encroach on his area of sunlight, and it came to be that Maurice was fully shaded. Maggie, outgrew him thanks to her bonus sunlight and the funneling of the water to her roots by the nearby trees, whilst Maurice had been, suffocated of both water and sunlight, and he failed to grow as quickly and as prolifically as Maggie. But, this is one of those things that it was very gradual transition. It wasn't as though one day Maggie just sprung up and blocked out Maurice's sunlight. No. It happened one leaf at a time. And so Maurice never really had a good time to bring it up, but eventually, he just had to. So it was on the day that Maggie sprung her 6,892nd leaf, and this one leaf covered up the last little trickle of sunlight that was getting through to Maurice, and Maurice just, someone nearby had watched Guardians of the Galaxy on their phone, and he saw the little I Am Groot thing going on in that movie, and it inspired him. It gave him the idea. He said, I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna stand on my own. So he pulled, and he pulled, but he just couldn't pull his roots out of the ground because, well, frankly, he lacked muscle tissue. So pulling in general was very difficult for him. But he thought there may be a way, and he looked to vegetables. He looked to the cucumbers and the pumpkins of the world, and he saw that these pumpkin plants, they have these little winding vines that wrap around things, and they grab on and they pull. And so he said, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna make a vine. So he tried to produce a vine, but all he could make was maple leaves. That was the only thing. And he got so fed up. Maybe I'll stop trying to pump it out the ends of my branches, and I'll try to pump it right out the middle of the trunk. And he busted a vein, and maple syrup came shooting out, and it was a mess. But alas, that didn't work either. So he said, you know what? I'm gonna need a little more imagination to come up with a good way to get out of here. And of course, then he looked to, the tree ants from various lores, and he said, if only I could be such a tree, up and walking about. So he imagined himself a tree ant for many, many years, and he tried to become one just through sheer force of will and power of imagination, but alas, he was still a maple tree, and just a regular maple tree, unable to move. And as those years went by, with the less and less sunlight he was receiving, he was growing weak, and he just, he was so fed up and so withheld and restrained. He was trapped that one day he just gave up, and he splintered himself. He said, strike me, lightning, strike me! And he yelled at the skies so that they would just set him ablaze, and at least then he could leave in the form of ashes and smoke. At the very least, he would be leaving. And so he called upon the skies, and he motioned for Zeus to send a lightning bolt to him, and in the end, it never happened either, because he wasn't the tallest tree in the area. So the day that they did have a thunderstorm and lightning came down, it crashed on a tall oak tree, and it just broke that tree, and it fell right over. And Maurice thought to himself, well, isn't this just ironic and such a tragedy for me, you know? He wasn't even thinking of Billy the birch that had just been felled. But nevertheless, he was still suffering and still dying, so he continued to wish for it, and he hoped that a tornado would come by and would just send him on the ground with all the other trees, and that it would put an end to his misery. But alas, you know, when the tornado came through, it actually, the shelter from the nearby pine trees protected him, and he didn't even get knocked down. It was just the nearby pines that got knocked down. So he thought to himself, well, again, you know, isn't this ironic? I'm still I wished for my demise, and I'm still standing. And another day, he wished upon himself that beetles would come and eat him. You know, an invasive species would just take him out of his misery and finally put an end to this. But it wasn't him. It was actually Maggie who was attacked by the beetles, and the beetles, they ate her up, and she was felled later on that year by some lumberjacks who came by and put red X's on all the trees that had been infected by the invasive species. So they chopped her down. And then again, Maurice thought to himself, well, isn't this just the worst possible coincidental luck? Everything that I have wished upon myself has happened not to me, but to my neighbors, and here I am, still standing. Oh, wait a second. And he realized, of course, that all the trees around him had been felled by these various disasters that he had wished upon himself. And now he stood alone with full sunlight and all the rain, you know, for his own roots. He could expand outward and grab all of that. Even the nutrients in the soil were almost all his now because the other trees were gone. And so he thought to himself, you know, maybe this is kind of ironic. But then again, you know, as a tree, I don't really know what irony is, so maybe it's not ironic. And then he thought on that for the rest of his days, just wondering what irony really is and not knowing.